You're a little bit fatalistic around our housing market.
No.
Because Australia actually does have quite a high home ownership rate.
Relative to other countries, that is true.
relative to other countries.
We've brought together some of Australia's most passionate political commentators to talk about the major issues on young people's minds. They're going to be debating a range of statements that are the policies and positions of different political parties. Australia is doing enough to combat climate change, and I'll get you to start on this one, Joel.
All right. When it comes to climate change, I actually don't subscribe to us doing net zero. I don't think it's a good idea. I think there's a lot more we could be doing for the world to combat homelessness, to combat people going hungry, to lift people out of poverty by actually having cheaper energy. I think that both major parties, Liberal and Labor, subscribing to a net zero policy is in net making living standards worse for Australia. It's taking industry away from Australia, it's making business harder to do, and it's increasing the cost of everything with regards to electricity as a result. And so in terms of, is Australia doing enough to combat climate change? We're doing far too much, absolutely.
Huh? What reality are you living in? We're doing too much to combat climate change. Do you believe in climate change?
No, I don't.
Not at all.
So that's the issue. You're living in a delusion. No, so you don't actually live in reality.
Hang on, let me answer your question.
Because what do you mean there's no climate? You don't believe in climate change at all.
Let me be specific. I do, but not. I don't think that the man-made climate change is as high as they say it is. I think a lot of it's actually natural.
I'm gonna have oh my God.
It's tough to have a conversation from that starting point though, because if you disagree fundamentally with the science, of course you're going to disagree with any action that tries to combat the scientific reality we're facing of global warming levels currently.
Well, put it to a referendum. Ask the people. I think most people would agree with me. I mean, you can...
You want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars asking the general population whether they agree with science?
Do you think as a whole there is a general consensus that climate change is real and is affecting us and we are all going to die in an awful climate change hellscape
maybe
apocalypse?
Not that
That's called
last
hyperbole, darling, you know. Like, I'm just having a bit of a laugh. Things aren't going well, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. Climate change is real and is exacerbated by fossil fuels. And Australia continues to open more and more coal mines, and the only solution that we have from the Liberal Party, for example, is to have a nuclear solution by 2040 while the Earth is dying.
The question was, does Australia do it enough? We do far too much. The US is out of Paris, India's out of Paris, China's out of Paris. No one's in Paris. So we are doing far too much. And the real problem with that is Australians are the ones that are paying the cost.
When you say we...
This is crazy.
Like, who are we talking about when we are doing too much? Because I think the climate debate becomes both a virtue signal for large corporations to pretend they're doing something, and it becomes a scapegoat for every problem in our society that it's because we built a wind farm as to why our society is crumbling. And the thing that I will forcefully inject into here is that the reason why Australia is suffering with living standards, cost of living, housing, energy, is because there is a set of corporate bludgers who are leeching off the taxpayer in Australia. Like 1 in 3 massive corporations doesn't pay tax. We're giving away our resources. I'm from Newcastle, Coal Town, 12% royalty or thereabouts. Fact check me, fact checks welcome, citations necessary. 12%, you ask me, that's a joke. Offshore gas, bugger all. And so there is this conversation around climate change, are we doing enough? The question when I say is who's paying? Because at the moment I would kind of like be sympathetic and go, if everyday Aussie punters are paying for this transition, get out.
We are.
Because those bludgers who are currently Japan, Inpex, Exxon, USA, Yancoal, Chinese, they're coming to our country getting, especially the gas I'm talking about specifically, they get it for free, they don't pay tax, they drive up our costs, and we are missing out on billions.
Freya, I'd love to hear from you because you mentioned on the phone something about young people feeling a lot of climate anxiety.
So I guess I think if we get into the weeds of, you know, this scientist says this scientist says that, I think we're not going to get anywhere productive. Humanity and human beings are incredibly intelligent, amazing at innovation, and we have frequently faced these kinds of like civilizational moments where it looks like everything is going to implode, and then we have innovated our way out of it. For example, in the early 1900s, there were people that thought London would be covered in horse manure because everyone was driving horses and carriages, and where was all the manure going to go?
Freya, it's a bit different.
It's different to horse poo, Freya. It's a little bit different to horse shit.
But then we invented cars, and all of a sudden, something that looked like it was going to be this existential problem, we innovated our way out of. Now, people think that, oh my gosh, emissions, climate change is going to be really bad, but we've invented renewables. We've invented nuclear, we have gas as a good transition, and so we should be moving towards a clean grid. And we can do that. And so I get really sad when I see young people not having children because they're scared about the climate, feeling such existential angst. And I just think that is unhealthy, it's fear-mongering, and we will be okay because we have the technological tools to overcome this challenge.
So are we doing enough in terms of renewables then? If your solution is renewables, are we doing enough? Because we don't have majority renewables in this country. So if you think your solution is renewables, come over this side, Chucky Lala, come to a Greens event with me.
So renewables are fantastic. When the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, yippee-doo. But what happens at night and when the wind's not blowing? That's when you need baseload power. Currently, currently our baseload power comes from coal. So if we say we want net zero grid, phase out coal, what are we going to replace it with?
Batteries.
Batteries are one option. How many batteries will we need?
Lots.
How much land? I've seen some modelling that shows that to power 100,000 homes for 1 hour with just solar will take about 3,000 AFL fields worth of solar panels.
It sucks that we live in a massive country.
And there's cattle stations, 700
Is it a desert? I think it's a desert.
How many forests is that going to take?
Don't chop them down. That's a silly idea.
No, but you will have to. And if you look at the zones that have already been identified for these huge industrial scale solar areas that are like almost the size of Tasmania.
Have you seen Newey coal mines?
It is in. Have you like Mount Kosciuszko? There are all these places where
We're not going to put them there.
Where they are deforesting to put in transmission lines.
Your original point was that humans have this amazing ability to overcome, and I totally agree with you, and it's a wonderful optimistic view. But you're saying the solution is renewables, and we're so amazing at finding solutions to problems, yet let's not do renewables.
But we can't do it.
So what's your
because
point?
there are environmental concerns with renewables as well.
Yeah, but you're saying...
And the cost as well is massive.
But you understand my original point is fighting your original point, which you're saying there's a solution here. We shouldn't have dread about this. But you're saying the solution is there. We agree the solution is there. That's why I'm saying you should come to a Greens event with us, because we agree.
But do you agree nuclear has a role?
Yes, it can have.
Okay, so you do support nuclear.
But I don't support... Hey.
Or you agree nuclear
All right,
has a role?
Sky News journalist.
This seems like a great transition to my nuclear prompt. Australia should move to nuclear power.
I think that whatever technology works, and I do have a bias towards decarbonising our energy. I think that the community does want not so much action on climate change, but they would like to see a cleaner, greener grid. And I don't know about you, but my power bills have definitely gone up. I live in a very cold part of the country, and my gas bill is crazy. The problem that we've got, and we've got politicians on both sides and activists on both sides that are telling people you can have all three of these things. You can have energy that is clean, you can have energy that is reliable, and you can have energy that doesn't cost too much. And the reality is that we just don't have that right now.
My bills haven't gone up because I have solar, so I get free. So my bills have actually stayed at zero.
Doesn't the nuclear modelling show us, though, that the average electricity bill got by $665?
Well, I think the modelling shows that regardless, if you're going to move to a clean grid, it's going to cost a lot. But having a purely renewable grid backed up by batteries and some gas is going to cost a whole lot more than if you add nuclear to the grid. I am pro renewables. I think we need to add more renewables, but we also need to have firming capacity.
Abby, you've got solar power. Do you have batteries in your property? Or?
All I know is I get some money back sometimes. It's usually zero. Sometimes I get money back, and Mum does as well, and she says I'm loaded. So that's all. So I actually know the technical working. Sorry, I wish I did, but I just had a little man gun on my roof when Mum was there and we were having Diet Cokes watching him. So yeah, I wish I knew. Sorry, I probably should know. Would you know? You might know of my home system.
No, I've never been there, but...
Yeah.
I know, anyway, different Conrad.
Yeah.
Low blow.
I'd love to hear from Hannah. What is your stance on nuclear, and tell us about some of the work you've done around that?
I think my stance on nuclear is quite anti-nuclear. The policy Peter Dutton and the Liberal Party have put forward around nuclear is cooking the books. It's inaccurate. These reactors cannot be built in the next 10 years. They're going to take a minimum of 15 years, and they're being underestimated in cost by $500 billion. Almost, I think it's $490 billion. When we're looking at it as well, it's not going to reduce energy prices. As I said, I believe it's on average going to raise energy bills by $665 on average, and then $972 for a family of 4, I believe. We need to focus on renewables. We need to focus on our 2030 targets. We've been having conversations about the science of climate, which is concerning in the first instance. And then in the second instance, to be looking at this debate between the sort of baseload power and moving from coal, which is archaic and unreliable as these systems age out.
Coal is not unreliable. It is literally what kicked off the Industrial Revolution.
It's just the wrong way to invest. It's the wrong way to look at this conversation. And all it's doing is distracting the population who already feel completely disempowered to talk about it.
As far as what I've seen with the whole nuclear thing and all that sort of stuff is that it's quite expensive, going to take a long time. The argument I never hear made about renewables, because everyone hates them because suddenly they're greeny lefty. I've got a libertarian mate. He's got solar and a battery because he doesn't want to be paying my gas bill. I do not run my gas heater because Santos is exporting 80% of our gas and we give it to them for free, and I can't run my gas heater in Newcastle because I can't afford it. My libertarian mate is like, I got a battery.
He does have a battery.
He doesn't pay a bill. He gets solar.
How big is the battery?
Yeah, it's
I'm curious.
that battery. I need to know something about batteries. Don't make a joke. We have an answer.
The numbers.
If we start seeing brownouts, very similar to what we see in South Africa, where we start seeing these intermittent load shedding blackouts, essentially, where are they hitting first? Are they hitting my town in Western Sydney and Parramatta? Because if that's what starts happening, there's
Newcastle's probably first.
No, I don't think so. I think it'll be the lower socioeconomic areas.
Newcastle.
And if it ends up happening, there's going to be hell to pay. And this is the problem with the lack of leadership on this topic. We need energy for business. We need energy so we can lift people in Australia out of poverty and also the world. And that's the price of getting this wrong.
I agree.
There are too many immigrants coming to Australia. I'd like to start with you, Joel, because you've been dying to speak about this.
Sure. So, no, look, immigration in Australia, it's far too high. My grandfather came here in the 60s, actually. He was a part of that percentage that was actually bringing a very useful trade to the country. He was a stonemason. The problem is today, we talk about we need more immigration, but we're talking in the millions now. I mean, this is far beyond what it was in the 60s, where it was about 100,000. And so the real challenge we face is we say we need more immigration because, we need the trades to build these houses. That's simply not what's coming in. Only 0.5% of the immigration that's coming in are actually useful trades to the construction industry. And I think that Liberal and Labor, and to an extent these big corporations, they want the cheap labour to come into the country for various other industries as well. 200,000 students coming in February, for example, it's far too much. And as a family of immigrants, you've got to come in, you've got to subscribe to our values, you've got to pay your taxes, and you have to, integrate into the Australian way of life.
Everyone can kind of beat up on international students, right? Because they're not citizens and they often don't earn enough money to pay tax. But international education is our third biggest export. It cross-subsidises the education of domestic students, yes. But I would kind of just like to talk about, well, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Now, what I sort of sense in the immigration debate at the moment is a lot of anxiety that's largely driven by cost of living and housing concerns, rather than necessarily this idea that we have too many immigrants. Like, for instance, during the 2000s, when the Howard government was in power, the Howard government actually increased our permanent skilled migration significantly over what it had been previously. And people didn't feel that anxiety about that. Why? Because it was actually a time of plenty. It was a time where people thought that they saw wages going up, they saw their house prices going up, which, if you were owning it at that time, that was a good sign for you. People felt wealthy and they felt comfortable and they felt like things were going well for them. People no longer feel that security.
40% of New South Wales and Victoria are roughly foreign-born. It's too much. It's one of the highest in the world.
And let them in. And how does it affect you?
It's a huge problem.
Most of those people came from Britain.
Yes,
and they're like,
it's all the Irish people in Coogee.
I don't understand how, why is that a problem in and of itself?
It's a huge problem.
Why?
Yeah, so as I said with
in and of itself, that figure, why is that a problem?
If I can get a word out. The problem with when you bring in too many people from overseas with a different culture.
How do you know that they're a different culture? We just talked about the fact that...
Because the highest growing immigration group is actually Indians.
Growing, that is not the same thing as the stocks and flows. They're different things, right?
We are seeing in terms of voting data, the highest invalid vote rate, people screwing up their ballots, is in these high
That is
immigrant
it.
areas.
What does that have to do with what we're talking about?
Because if you're not integrating, if you don't understand what's going on,
That is not a
you,
measure of integration.
Hang on a second. There are so many variables that are going into that. Like, I would think that areas with high immigrant populations, outer suburbs, also tend to be areas with like lower educated people or poorer people who are more likely to struggle with filling out a ballot. Like, I just don't see how that's.
And our voting system isn't that simple.
I think that immigration has become, it will be one of the centre points of this election campaign, it already is. But the way it's being thrown around is directly in relation to housing,
yes,
right?
That's right.
And I think that's the first thing to point out, that it's not migrants that are the problem, it is foreign investors. And the reason for that is we've had 16% population growth over the last 10 years and 19% dwelling growth. There is construction that's outpacing the population growth. So that in of itself proves that migration is not the issue. Migration rates are not the issue.
Now put it to a vote then.
I'll just keep going
Why don't
for
you
a
put
second.
it to a vote? Yeah, please.
When we talk
Sorry.
about putting it to a vote, the reason you can say that and the reason that you can just throw it to public debate is because the sentiment from the leaders in this country of the major parties is that they're dog whistling to the far right and to the racism that exists in this country. And so the use of the word immigrants is purely to throw blame to a population that have less, again, it might be literacy around voting, to actually use their voice and advocate. So when you say that, and I actually feel really sad hearing that you're saying you're an immigrant and people have to integrate in exactly the way that you believe, I think that's unfortunate. I wish in this country we were more accepting of a more multicultural society, and instead you're saying there's lower voting literacy because of immigrants and that that's simply not allowed and the worst measure of a person.
Well, if I can get a word out, the problem is if it was good enough to throw the voice to a referendum, it's good enough to throw immigration to a referendum.
That's how Indigenous Australians.
The voice was a constitutional change. It literally needed to go to a referendum.
Can I just jump in here? I feel like we're now jumping into a completely different topic.
Go
But
for it,
to
We're talking
bring
about immigration.
but
And
bringing
immigration
up
is closely
voice
tied to racism.
to bring this conversation back. So my dad is an immigrant, for example. Australia is Australia is one of the most successful migrant story countries in the world. Like, you know, your family were migrants, my family, your family. So
other countries envy our system.
Exactly. And it's been so successful. And the vast majority of people have come here, built a life, had families, contributed to the country, joined into Australian society. Now, one of the concerns you're raising is that on a values level, when you have such high rates of migration, is it possible for that many people to integrate into our country? And so that is one concern. But on the other hand, I think it's just all about a balance. So, and you raise these numbers, Hannah, that dwelling growth has outpaced population growth. Over the last 10 years, that's true, because under the last Liberal government, we were actually building record numbers of houses. Right now, we're building houses at a decade low. In the first 2 years of Labor, we had over 1 million migrants come in, and we only built around 350,000 houses. The reason this has only come up this election is because it's an issue that has only really sprung up at this rate in the last couple of years.
Or is it because of Trump's talking point in the fact that he's...
it's basic numbers. It's basic supply and
It's a return
demand.
after COVID.
So we're building less houses and we're bringing in significantly more people. We were building houses at a decade low rate.
Oh, hang on a second. House building rates are in part going to be affected by broader market conditions and economic
Exactly, because we have high
anxiety.
interest rates.
But to go back to the real issue is that we know, and I think we can all agree, that like there is a real economic benefit to migration. We could, for instance, slash all of international students if we wanted to. We could do that, but what would be the consequence of that? We just need to have a sensible discussion about what that trade-off would look like. And then we need to fix problems like housing with policies that affect housing, rather than trying to say that the real problem here is these other people.
I'd like to go to Conrad. Can you please end this topic?
The pressure. I think it's obviously a very hot button issue because it very quickly comes back to cost of living and housing, which I think we established. Housing is cooked. It was cooked before immigration rates. It was cooked after immigration rates. But I think it is potent for the Australian public, and it's something that is thrown as a distraction, and it's a deliberate tactic to throw the immigration debate out. But it works so well because one side of politics is afraid to talk about it for fear of being racist, and the other side of politics I've seen it in my comments, they want to blame everything on immigration. And I think, honestly, challenge to the left, you have to talk about it. You have to go, what is our plan? Because we do in this country have an immigration Ponzi scheme where we want GDP to go up and we will import whoever we want, low skill wages, whatever we want. And the left won't. We just need to have the conversation. It's tough. It's bloody tough, and I can see why it's such red meat to the wolves of making everyone fight.
Property investing makes it harder for young people to get into housing. Can I hear from Abby here and sort of where you're coming from on the topic of property investing?
What, the fact that I have an investment property?
If you'd be comfortable sharing.
Yeah. So I invested in property during COVID. I was really lonely and I wanted to buy a house. I thought I was going to go live in Byron and I didn't, okay? That's what happened.
Are you the problem?
I'm the problem. I'm
Is
the problem.
Abby to blame for this whole thing?
I was going to say, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you,
No, I was just going to say.
No, but I am the problem. It makes me feel sick. It makes me feel... I do think that I'm part of the problem.
But maybe the question to you then is, do you support ending negative gearing?
Absolutely.
Right. And
tax breaks that you might be getting.
So being a landlord, I completely support ending negative gearing. Even things like rental caps, I do support restrictions on landlords and property investors. I think it's the right thing to do, the same way that I love paying tax in a really weird way.
So property investors, well, they definitely do have an impact on the demand side in that, it's terrible if you're going to an auction and then a bunch of investors rock up and outbid you. They do have an important role around new builds in supporting the new supply of housing. And so we shouldn't demonise them. Is there room for reform? Definitely. But they do play an important role in providing private rental accommodation.
I think we should have a cap on rental increases that only aligns with inflation. As someone who has tenants myself, literally last week, it was the year since they started their tenancy, and I was like, keep it what it is because I don't want to earn any more money off these people. I think it's sick and twisted, even though my mortgage repayments have almost doubled. As we know, housing is a human right, or it should be a human right. It's not currently in this country. And I think that having unlimited rental increases destabilises people. It allows landlords and property developers to be greedier and greedier. It can increase housing prices. And I just don't think it needs to be a thing. I think we should have capped rental increases, undoubtedly.
When it comes to rental caps, and this is one of those policy solutions that comes from overseas and is actually one of the best studied issues in economics. What happens when you have rental caps is that the quality of rental housing goes down because it is no longer able to be responsive to, costs. The quality goes down, the supply goes down. What it does is that it hurts the most vulnerable. If you can't really kind of change what you charge, then the people who are the most secure looking tenants are the ones that kind of keep getting their houses.
Can I go to Freya?
I think that's right. I think rent caps are a complete distraction in the whole discussion. The only things that will really change the price of rent are supply and demand. And you mentioned this, Abby, like mortgages have gone up substantially. And the majority of rental properties are provided by mum and dad investors who are now themselves on an average mortgage of around $750,000. Over the last 3 years, you've had to pay an extra $50,000. And it's terrible that it's being passed on to renters, but someone's got to pay for that.
But the point is to encourage landlords to sell those houses. That's kind of what I want.
But then,
for example, I'm losing so much money on this investment property that was a very silly decision for me to do in the first place. I don't expect to make profit. I've never made profit on these renters because I'm aware that I'm actually beneficiary in having this house as a whole. I'm the one who actually owns the property and who has the benefit of saying I have this asset, right? So if it gets to a point where I can't afford to pay my mortgage, I should sell my second home.
You should.
That's what I should be
sell
doing.
It. And
but that's what we're trying. That's what I would love to encourage.
So can I give you an example? So in Victoria, under the Labor government, since 2021, they've had around 150 amendments to their Rental Act. They've put in a lot of renters' rights. They've made it so that I think you can only raise rents like once a year or something. So like almost
But
rent
unlimited
caps.
amount.
Almost rent caps.
That's
but
not a
it's
rent cap,
heading,
is
but
it?
it's heading in that direction. And what has happened is that you've had over 24,000 properties come off of the rental market. Investors are selling their apartments, and this is the risk you face when you penalise landlords. They will just sell those properties, and then who are people going to rent from?
Can I just insert a stat? Because the Liberal Party generally and certain sides of politics, they like to hide behind mum and dad investors. And one stat that I saw, fact checks welcome, 1% of property investors own 25% of the rental market. So let's just get our head around that. And so when we talk about this, I feel like the mum and dad is a deliberate political ploy.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair to compare those policies because what's happened in Queensland, they tried to debate this same thing, the implementation of a once-a-year increase, but that's to an unlimited value. So that's not a rent cap whatsoever. It's not comparable. And I think that when we're talking about renters' rights, we already know the people on the back foot. And the idea, I completely agree with Conrad, that we're hiding behind mum and dad investors when that's really not the crux of the issue. It's mass property developers like the opposition leader who are directly putting his son in front of cameras to say he can't afford a home. Well, Peter Dutton, to that I would say you are the person that has transferred, I believe, 26 properties across 3 decades to the tune of $30 million. So you have a direct vested interest in all of these policies, and I think that they should be declared much more widely because these people making decisions that affect first home buyers like myself. I'm a renter who's paying $560 a week in Sydney for 1 bedroom in a share house right now. I may never enter the property market.
Sad.
And it's really interesting watching people like Peter Dutton and Anthony Albanese debate my future when none of those policies actually work on long-term increasing availability for young people.
I spent 8 years in the construction industry, and the problem I see on the supply side of things is construction has never been harder, and property investing, I do believe the property developers, they've very much been demonised in this situation. At the end of the day, landlords, property investors, property developers, construction companies, they're going to do what's in their interest. That's just what's going to be what's happened. The government needs to get out of the way. They really need to get out of the way on this. The amount of red tape that's out there, the amount of construction businesses that have gone up under in 2024 is 2,800 businesses. The business I worked for was one of them. And the real problem with that is if you don't have that proper supply coming up, then how can we actually house the world? And that's what's happening. The immigration rate is nuts. Australia has like a gold medal in the amount of houses we've built per capita. We are way out there ahead of most countries, but we're bringing too many people in.
But you're saying that there's not enough being supplied, then you're also saying that we have a gold medal in supply.
Yeah, so we're already doing really well, and it could even be better. But the problem is, despite that, we are actually seeing a massive, what would you say, demand as a result of the immigration we've taken in.
The entire housing market currently is geared towards benefiting investors. Negative gearing, the capital gains tax discount, these are things that clear the way for property investors to continue to build wealth and keep first home buyers out. I have no understanding of what you're saying.
I don't think you should get rid of negative gearing. I think it's a radical policy, and I think if you go after investors in that way, you'll see a massive drop in supply as a result.
I have a problem with the idea that negative gearing on houses is bad, but negative gearing, which is literally just the tax deductibility of losses, is fine across other things. And like I know that there is a view that negative gearing increases the price of houses. I think research from my colleague Peter Tulip when he was at the Reserve Bank of Australia found that it increased the prices of by 1 to 4%. Happy to have that fact checked. 1 to 4%, which is it's not nothing, but it's also not significant. If we try to look at what's happening in Australia, we try to say, oh, what's happened uniquely in Australia is that, prices started increasing, say, like 20 years ago massively and kind of became completely decoupled from incomes, ignores the fact that that price increase that we've seen has actually happened across all sorts of countries in the world that did not have our specific policy around negative gearing and the capital gains tax discount.
I'd like to hear from Conrad because you are a renter. Would you like to give your view on investing?
Let's just establish how cooked our housing situation is and how every government we've had has cooked the books, because this isn't a crisis for everybody. The market is providing exactly what it's been designed to do. This is a bonanza for banks, investors, property landlords. These guys are making a killing. There is trillions of Australia's economic wealth tied up in the most useless asset in Australia called bricks and houses. Doesn't employ anybody, doesn't start any jobs, doesn't invent anything. it's a dumb little house that we've juiced the prices of, and all of these policies have been designed to siphon taxpayer dollar into juicing these prices. So, like, if we can just recognise that we are as cooked with housing as the US is with Medicare, and how cooked that we look at them and go, what a bunch of idiots.
Totally.
So let's look at housing. If you're rich, you've got houses, sick. Taxpayers will subsidise you to buy properties. But for some reason, in this whole time, I'm still renting, and even if I started saving 10 years ago, right now, I would be 10 years away from getting a house. And so if we think the free market of privatised housing, 91% of privatised landlord and investors, if that's working, I mean, we've got to recognise it's not. And so the whole market needs to be reshaped.
First home buyers should be able to use their super to buy a home.
I don't think that this idea from Dutton to allow people to go into their super to buy a home makes any sense. First of all, it will increase the prices of housing. The more people will be able to buy a house, demand will increase, price will increase, as everyone knows here. On top of that, I don't think that average Australians should be the ones bearing the brunt of our housing crisis. It will make it worse, it will exacerbate it, but also people will then be taking out of their super, their retirement fund that is so important when they retire. And it's so essential to have as much money as you can in your super. I think that it will also only benefit those who are more wealthy. People who actually have money in their super. It won't address the actual issue of lower socioeconomic people trying to enter the market.
Some research from my colleague Peter Tulip with Matt Taylor, released a couple of weeks ago, showed that if you did allow superannuation to be accessed to for first home buyers, that you could bring forward the ability to buy a house by about 3 years. But one of the other things that they recommend in that report is that you cannot have that policy independent of massive increases to supply, because otherwise, exactly what you said, Abby, it is a demand side policy. But on the other side, it is also true that the number one predictor of living standards in retirement is whether or not you own your own home. So if we kind of take a step back, it is actually not a bad idea to say that part of people's, I guess, retirement plan can in fact be owning their own home.
Just in regards to the biggest asset you can have in retirement is a house, I totally agree. My point, I guess, is there are other alternative policy that we can put into place, like Labor's Help to Buy scheme, where, look, there's a chance that it will increase a demand and therefore increase prices the same way this super policy will. But I think the reality is that I would prefer the burden to not be on the individual Australian, particularly those that are lower socioeconomically, and rather the burden to be on the government.
Super is your money. So I'm supportive of Australians having more choice around how they spend their money. And I think the point Tricia made around having your own home, especially mortgage-free in retirement, is the best thing you can do. So if we can accelerate that, get people into their first home sooner, that should be something we strive to do. However, it has to be part of a broader policy package that eases demand and boost supply. And if you can do that while also giving first home buyers a leg up, giving them just that extra edge over other people, over, you know, investors, whatever, then I think that is
It's not a leg up over
then
investors.
I think that is a good thing. But it is
It's
because
not.
so
It's not. That's David and Goliath.
No, if
50
you
grand
can,
to an investor is 4 cents.
We've had 20 years of this. Libs, 10 years. Labor, 3, 5, whatever. Knife.
Six-ish.
That's our thing. To me, from what I've witnessed, same policies. Oh, we'll sprinkle some cash. Property prices. Like,
State governments
do we-
too, first homeowners grants,
Do we
stamp
really
duty
think
exemptions.
that any of this is actually going to work, even if it speeds up me by 2 years, and maybe when I'm 70, maybe I have a
okay,
house?
but you also, you're a little bit fatalistic around our housing market.
No.
Because Australia actually does
Realistic.
have quite a high home ownership rate.
Relative
and
to
it
other countries,
is
that is true.
relative
What's
to
the
other
age group on
countries.
that?
And it is still possible to buy a first home. I think the average age of a first home buyer is in their late 20s,
And what's the
early
trend?
30s.
What's the trend line?
And it's getting older, and that's what we have to address. We have to bring
I'm
that
getting
age
older, so
back
maybe
down.
if I do-
But
But I'm
saying that
wondering-
it's all terrible and the last 20 years have been a
it
failure
not?
is factually wrong.
Really?
Can you just
You
steal from
can still
yourself?
buy your
Yeah,
own
babe,
home in
can I
Australia,
ask-
but it's too hard and we need to make it easier.
Would you support Help to Buy in the same way you support super, taking it out of your super? Because taking out of your super is just punishing your future self.
It's literally stealing from your
It's
future
stealing
self.
It is
Future
not
self,
stealing from
it's
your future
awful.
self because one, when you sell the house, you have to put that money back
It's
into your
the
super.
interest.
And two, the best thing you can do for your retirement is to own your own home. And three, it's a choice. No one's forcing you to use your superannuation.
But people will be forced in the way that our housing market is so cooked that people do feel forced because it's the only option that they see.
I'm not sure if we'd agree on this, but I think the issue is that the major parties are presenting sugar hit policies that sell to a lot of vulnerable Australians. They're basically buying votes with this. That the idea is if we can throw you a bone that indicates you'll be able to get into the market in the next 1 to 2 years with these policies, everything's sweet. And actually what they're asking is for young Australians who are first home buyers to opt in really fast, even if they're not quite ready, because how can any of us be ready in the current market unless we're making huge cash? But at the end of the day, what we're looking at is this system where young Australians are going, well, I'm going to vote for this party simply because of this one policy, not understanding what it means long term for all of us. So Labor is providing a partial policy which is actually investing in development and investing in 100,000 new builds for first home buyers exclusively. But then we've got policies from the Greens which are about negative gearing, which are about actual social housing and ensuring it's government owned, like a defence system policy. And I think that the Greens are offering the best policy right now. But what I at least like is that we are all nodding in agreement on the issue being that the major parties aren't really offering up something that actually helps us all long term.
No, they're hopeless. They're hopeless, yeah.
Student debt should be slashed.
Hells yes, 80 grand debt, 2 degrees, cut it. Why the hell not? If we enjoy doctors, if we enjoy engineers, if we enjoy not waiting 5 hours at a doctor and we want an educated society, why the bloody hell not very close to free?
Yeah, can I just say, when it comes to university degrees, I don't think we should have ever been having the HECS thing. Now that all these students have come in and they've started taking these debts, you know, God bless them, they didn't know anything better. My cousin, for example, he paid off his full degree, but now he's seeing that you got 20% forgiveness. He's like, well, why did I bloody pay the thing off?
Because he's a nice guy and he wants to help a punter out.
And that's the problem. Are we going to punish people that pay early? Now no one's going to pay. And so if now that they're doing this 20% forgiveness, they're going to have to go all the way to 100% eventually. And so it should never have come in. That's my radical opinion.
Sorry, do you mean that it shouldn't have come in as in it should have always been free? Or it should have been privatised?
It should have always been pay up front, because I believe, for example...
I'm glad we're clarifying, because I thought you were going the opposite way.
No, absolutely. No, the students should have always paid up front, I believe, because... Let me tell you why. Because I believe that the price of the university degree, for example, some of my friends, $2,000 to $3,000 a subject, when you know that this loan is going to be backed up by the government, the universities, they can charge what they want. But if there's actually genuine competition between the universities and the students have to pay up front, they're like, all right, now we have to compete over the price, get that $3,000 per subject down to maybe $1.5, $1,000. So in total, I can see the reaction on your face.
How does that work in America, dude?
Why do you think that students should have to? Why do you think that people should pay for us to have an educated and qualified population that offer us services?
Because the primary beneficiary of a university education in terms of lifetime incomes is the individual. Now, I don't fully agree with Joel, because I actually think that the system we've got now, which is a combination of relatively low and capped student loans relative to, say, other countries like the US, combined with some element of government subsidy, is a pretty good one, because what the purpose is that it doesn't create this big barrier for students from different backgrounds, for that are poorer or whatever, to go to university, but it also doesn't put the entire cost back to the taxpayer. And what Joel says is correct in the sense that universities currently are in the middle of being able to enrol as many students as they want. They face no penalties and no consequences if the students that they enrol don't finish their degree, it's not the right fit for them, or any of those things.
I think HECS is one of the greatest systems we have. I do at a fundamental level believe that people should have access to one undergraduate degree for free. But I think that when we look at HECS as a system, I would actually remove the process of indexation. I don't think the government should be profiting off loans long term when it's so difficult for people to pay them back. But I'm someone who came from a middle to low income background, and I never would have been able to go to university without the HECS system. Mm-hmm. So the reason that I have a law degree, that I have a master's degree, is purely because of the HECS system. Yes, I agree that university degrees, for one, should be free, because the reason I'm a tertiary educated individual that can contribute to society at a higher level is because of that access. So I find it interesting that you say people should be able to pay up front, because that means education is not equitable.
To come back to your point, Conrad, someone always has to pay. Because universities will never be free, because you've got thousands of academics that need to be paid, thousands of staff working at these universities, big facilities to maintain research that has to be conducted. So if it's not these students paying, then it's going to be other taxpayers. Now, I would have a bit of an issue saying to the tradie in Western Sydney, or the mum, the single mum, going, you didn't go to uni, you didn't get the benefit of a degree, but your taxes have to go towards paying for someone else's degree. I do have some concerns though, that because universities are not liable in any way for the quality of education or the skills they give to their graduates, they have an incentive to enroll students that really shouldn't be going to university. As you talked about indexation, Hannah, I think that universities should be liable for the indexed portion of your HECS debt if you're not in a job after a certain number of years.
I think there's fair points all around with the university systems cooked, half private, half public. They're admitting students like a cash cow. But to take the core point of like who gets the value and benefit in society, I don't want to be a doctor. I can't study to be a doctor. I'm not, but I'm very thankful that my brother-in-law went and studied for 12 years to become a doctor so that when I need him, it's good. And when we start crunching these tiny little numbers, then I think we all end up paying more in the long run, but in not measured ways.
The purpose of a subsidy, though, is to change someone's behaviour. The taxpayer already subsidises university places. Say your brother-in-law or anybody else doing a medical degree. Was that something that they need to be given a free ride to do that? Or is it something where they sort of have a personal value system where they think, I want to go and do this for various reasons? People choose careers for all sorts of reasons. The problem with having the entirety of the cost going onto the taxpayer and essentially the punter having no real kind of bearing a cost of themselves at all means that it creates a set of incentives for them to maybe make decisions that aren't actually the best for them.
The whole idea of taxation, though, is so that we pay for things that are for the greater community. So if we start going down that, then I go, well, I live in Bondi, so why would I care about the roads in the western suburbs? Why would I care about people in Darwin? Why would I care about anyone else but myself? It's an incredibly selfish view from my point of view to say, well, if that person gets that degree, what do I get out of that? It's actually about society as a whole progressing. As Conrad said, we get benefits from nurses, teachers, doctors, even people that are in healthcare or non-philanthropic-esque jobs are benefiting society and our economy.
And that's a wrap.
Yay!
Thank you, guys. Thanks for that. I really enjoyed that.
Well done.
That was my pleasure.
Well done. Well done.
Oh yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.
I liked it.